Welcome to the DMINTI podcast. I'm Shivani, director, co-founder of Museum of Crypto Art. Here is Sophia Garcia, incredible pioneer, curator of maybe the most interesting art of our generation. Sophia, do you want to tell us who you are, your story, anything to kind of break the ice?
Yeah, totally. Well, hi, I am Sophia Garcia. I am the founder of ARTXCODE, really a place to support the algorithmic arts in all the many ways. So be it private sales, special projects, exhibitions, anything along those lines are my jam. I work with code-based artists. We've been doing that for the last few years, and it's really been incredible to see how much has changed in just such a short period of time. Yeah, and now obviously like riding this wave, having the best time, supporting the artists the best way that I can, advising them, advising collectors, advising institutions on all things generative art and Web3.
Yay! So I had a couple questions in mind, and then we can just chat. Well, first of all, how was Art Basel what is the last 6 months to you in this space?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, I will say Art Basel was so much fun. It was so much fun, and it honestly, best one yet. I think one of the coolest things about it was just seeing how many digital art exhibitions there were and how much stronger they were than last year. I think everyone was really quick to throw some things on a screen and call it an NFT art show last year. And this year, we really saw people step up. A lot of the organizers stepped up completely. So big ups to Refraction DAO, to Vertical Crypto Art, to AKG, everyone, that just kind of came together to talk about and strengthen the conversation around digital art. So it was really great. And I had the best time. We actually had to reschedule this podcast to take over for my voice was gone completely. So thanks again for that.
That's so good to hear. I definitely it's interesting because it's the last 6 months with crypto, it's a complete shitstorm.
Oh yes.
But then with art and culture, right? People are still interested in the conversation and the visuals,
So I think that I wish I remembered the numbers. But we had this conversation the other day, and it was really talking about how, right now everyone's talking about all of the numbers going down in terms of how many people are collecting NFTs or acquiring NFTs, how many people are using all of this stuff. And at that larger level, all those numbers are going down. But when you take a step in and you look at the generative art market, it's actually completely different. And we're actually seeing the floors of certain artworks rise from even more than last year. And it's been super impressive to see, even seeing QQL come out. And I think that was a $17 million release at the end. And, it's kind of just showcasing. And I think this also, we see this mirror in the real world too, in 2007, 2008, while the financial markets were doing their thing, the art world was fine. And I think, art moves in a completely different way than the rest of the world. And so we can see things happening in crypto, but, people buy art for so many different reasons. And generative art specifically has seemed to be one that really resonates with the community. And it's been incredible to see these artists still be able to flourish despite all of the noise around the crypto markets, because you can still buy these works in USDC and FaroFile, you can use your credit card. They don't necessarily have to be tied to the crypto markets. And I think that's one of the fascinating parts of this as well. And my hope now is that a lot of the noise that came in last year around, kind of these fake promises of quick profits, easy flips, things of that sort. I think everyone's been hit with a reality check that's just not how the world works. And so I'm hoping people now are a little bit more cautious, or really just buying things that they can afford and that they like. And, we can continue to move this conversation forward.
So you started working with the algorithmic arts before the blockchain, before you decided to tokenize works,
yes,
or even start to think about NFTs. So when that transition happened, why did you move to NFTs, and what's the purpose of tokenizing artwork if you're just using USD?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so the way I started working with NFTs was quite serendipitous, but at the same time, I had been going to art and blockchain events in New York. There was a really cool hackathon at MIT where I think this was in 2018, where I had met the CryptoPunk guys, the Dada, Judy Mum from Dada, and all these people who were really interested and starting to think about tokenization. And at that point, the idea of a digital collectible was already in my head. And I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. But I hadn't engaged with it I guess in a significant way. I think I did have a crypto kitty though. That was one that I was like, I'll get a crypto kitty, sure. But, it was at that time, since about 2015, I was really into this idea of creative coding and, promoting generative art. And when we first started doing our shows, it became really clear the ways in which we would have to showcase this work in order to actually get it sold. So really the only way before blockchain were prints. There were there were really cool experimental galleries like Transfer Gallery and places like that were already selling digital art beforehand. So it's not like it was unheard of to sell digital art by basically selling a USB drive, and they have their own documentation of who owns it, things of that sort. But what the blockchain did was really decentralize all of that in a completely different manner. Also, I have a snoring dog right next to me, so if you hear anything,
it's okay. I have construction noise. It's like we're good.
Okay. Anyway, so once we started experimenting with this idea of tokenizing art, it really changed the way that I saw everything. So beforehand, and actually, this is gonna be video, right? So the works behind me here is Tyler Hobbs' work from 2018, and this is pen plotted. And when he would sell this work, and when he still does this, when you sell this work, we get a pamphlet of the code that produced it. And that was kind of this way of coupling up the visual asset with the actual medium behind the scenes. And that was something that I really enjoyed. And so for 2019, every show that we did, we would have these prints up on the wall, but we would also have a binder filled with code for anyone who was interested, that they can go through and actually understand what was creating this physical manifestation of it. And once we were able to, it's a little bit more complicated because there's two things. There's kind of this the tokenization as we know it, which is taking certain assets, tokenizing their visuals, and then there's this idea of on-chain generative art, which is a completely different framework where the code itself is stored within the token. And that has been the biggest game changer across all of this. Many thanks to Larva Labs and Art on the Blockchain. I'm talking about his Twitter handle, Eric Calderon and Art Blocks, and everything that they've done to really proliferate that. So when I first realized that there were buyers interested in just acquiring the digital asset, that changed everything for me, like completely. But it really wasn't until 2020 when I saw the power of that. We were going to do a show in Paris. It got canceled, obviously. They did an online show that was kind of a bust. I worked with the artists and said, why don't we take these works and put them on Super Rare? And that was the first time I really experienced a full sale just through tokens, just through NFTs. And, these works were selling more than what we thought we were going to sell the prints for. We hadn't even produced the prints yet. We were going to do them by order. So we never received orders. We decided to put the digital assets on open bids, and the bids were coming in, and we were like, oh my God, all these people are placing bids on this artwork. I was fascinated by this just from a logistics point of view too. I didn't have to pay for production. I didn't have to pay for shipping. I didn't have to do anything about it. Or the artist created the work in its native medium. They tokenized it. They transferred it over to me. I managed the sale, and it was done. I dropped my percentage by like over 10%, because it was just like I didn't have to do any of these like upfront costs that are usually necessary for these types of sales. So it was really, really cool. And that is like my long-winded answer to our
really interesting.
but it was really cool. And I think since then, seeing all the different marketplaces that have popped up, like art blocks, like FX Hash, and even Hick and Nunk when it was around, just seeing the ways in which you could acquire code-based artwork in its native environment was fascinating and really made me so excited, not only as a appreciator of the arts, but as a collector as well. So,
wow, that's so interesting, because I'm noticing so I studied art history with a focus on like public arts, right? And what it means for there to be like a public in any place. Yeah. And like cryptocurrency fascinated me because the idea of the public is outside of the authority in general, because you have no fiat, right? Yeah. So the authority is the group, like the public is the authority. So the consensus by which like people using crypto decide the artwork and what it means to them is such an interesting exercise of just like humanity. And I'm seeing like kind of a split in like what is like digital art that is like tokenized on blockchains, because like like Adobe's going to have their own blockchain in like 5 or 6 years, right? Like every company will have like a blockchain, versus the like sense of mechanism and interaction. But generative art is like kind of the one that does both without angering the other side.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Otherwise, there's very much a like X copy and a, like David O'Reilly, right? Who both, like David's obviously like written off NFTs now, but like incredible master of digital art who tried it out, figured out it wasn't the right fit. Yeah. Way. And then like X copies, like pure 100% crypto, right?
Like all in.
I don't know. With generative art, like with art blocks, like what do you see? I mean, do you think it's like art blocks will continue and like generative art on chain will proliferate? Or do you see like generative art, aside from the fact that it's being worked with crypto and just like fiat NFT generative art being the, winner? Or are they like two separate ecosystems now?
So it's the question, like, do we think that art blocks will continue its like own thing, or that
do you think tokenized algorithmic arts like need to be sold in cryptocurrency for the same mechanisms of like action and community to work? No.
But and this is actually a conversation that I think it was during NFT NYC that I was doing a panel with Snowfro, actually. So Eric from Art Blocks, who he also said like we might, like, in order to decouple this idea of this art being a speculative asset, like we need to decouple it from the speculative asset. So the crypto, like cryptocurrency, these things can't exist without the need of, it's kind of like an optional thing. And it's something that I've experimented with like all of last year. Anytime we sold a print, anytime we sold even an artwork, it was like, do you want to pay in cash or do you want to pay in USDC? Because you can pay in ETH, and you can pay us in cash and we'll just transfer everything over to you. Well, the sale can still happen. It just, it's optional. And we find that, especially in our community, people do love to pay in crypto, especially when crypto's doing well. But at the same time, there needs to be options. And I think we're still in this experimental phase that it's so hard to say that, like, okay, moving forward, I'm only going to sell my work in fiat, or moving forward, I'm only going to sell it in crypto. It's still kind of, you get to choose. So like in Ferrofile, they have the option, you can pay with your credit card, or you can load up a wallet there with cryptocurrency, and you can decide to pay in either. And I think it's been really interesting because we still do say, like, if something was sold for 5 ETH, for example, we're still talking about the US equivalent, the USD equivalent. We still talk like, oh, it's sold for $2 million, or like not, amount of ETH. So there's still this thing that's happening where we kind of are defaulting to USD prices anyway. And I am interested to see how it continues over the next few years, because we do have this ecosystem of people who are crypto natives, and are sitting on a ton of cryptocurrency and enjoy that sort of transaction, while there's a whole other group of collectors who aren't as, they aren't as interested in going all in on this ecosystem, but are maybe interested in dabbling in these types of acquisitions. So yeah, let's see what happens over. I think this year will be a good like 2023 will be a good indicator of like where these trends are going.
Totally. Because I mean, there's just like reality playing out. There's like ideals, right?
Yeah.
And then there's like reality of how people react.
Well, even with I mean, if we want to get into a whole royalty debate, that's a whole other thing. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a can of worms, but
I saw your tweet on the OpenSea thing, and I was like, fuck, that's horrible. And I was also like, okay, these guys have probably lost like 90% of their revenue.
Yeah.
So they're just desperate. But at the same time, like, you know, how do you play with your ideals as a business and like the reality of needing to pay your employees?
Yeah, it's a really nuanced thing, and it's kind of like I really do appreciate that now, like in their new, because I think, you know, corporations, especially in this space, tend to go really fast. It's like, oh, you know, move fast sort of mentality. So they're like, let's implement this and see what happens. Obviously that did not work. But one of my biggest qualms with them, and we had a call, and I was very vocal about it, was just this idea of instantly defaulting to 0% royalties and not even giving collectors the option. Like, we had collectors reaching out to us to honor the royalty because OpenSea wouldn't even let them. Another thing was the fact that it was a centralized approach where it was only OpenSea enforcing this. And, you know, I felt like it was very anti-competition and kind of like showed that they were threatened by sharing the, like, you know, the fact that they were losing market share. But I think that now, just with like the new updates, it's not perfect, but I can kind of wrap my head around this idea of like, okay, there's this now decentralized, or, you know, this like small group of people. What was it? OPIC, I think it was.
Yeah, they made like a group. Yeah,
this group of people. This is now no longer just managed by OpenSea. It is an optional thing that you can opt into, saying, I don't want my work being sold on marketplaces that don't honor royalties. There is something to that I think is also important, that it's like, okay, maybe as a community, we can say we don't appreciate, or as a creator, I would not like my work sold on marketplaces that don't align with my values as a creator. So there's a pro to that. I just think that the implementation that OpenSea did was basically putting a gun to creators' heads, saying, do this, or you don't get any of your royalties, which is fucked. So I didn't appreciate that at all. I thought it was, and especially the communication. That was another big gripe with mine, that why wasn't like red letters all over your website, because we found out our smart contract was live. The you know, the smart contract was implemented. It's at 0%. We had done this big negotiation with like this larger you know, organization, and maybe we would have negotiated differently if we knew that you know, they weren't going to get royalties or things of that sort. And so now we just saw an artist. One of the biggest selling points of working with NFTs is artists being able to participate in the upside of their success. And, you know, right after a drop, you see a lot of activity, a lot of trading activity, and that's all money that would go to the artist. Like, I don't get any of that money. Like, I don't care. But at the same time, I care when the artist who's put in like day in and day out for like at least like months, you know, putting in to make this project a reality, now they're not getting anything out of that because a corporation decided that you need to follow our rules or else. And that makes no sense to me. So I'm glad that they made some changes. I don't think that it's perfect, but you know, the whole thing around royalties is really frustrating, because there's also this other side where, you know, as a collector, you can see the royalties beforehand. You know what I mean? You see what the breakthrough is. And if you don't want to buy a project with royalties and you don't want to honor those royalties, don't buy the project. Like that, you know, like, don't buy into something that you clearly see the breakdown in and then cry foul when it's time for you to sell it and pay the royalties that you agree to once you bought the artwork. that's a whole other thing, a whole other conversation that I know a lot of collectors don't want to have, but it's true. And it's one of the core selling points of participating in this. I've heard this idea of like predatory royalties. I would like to see examples of that between an artist. I think that another big issue is that NFTs being kind of a blanket statement for anything, where we have very different assets that fall under asset classes that fall under like the NFT umbrella. So you have profile pictures, you have like mint passes and all these different things, and then you just have artwork for the sake of artwork. And I think that's the toughest part now, just like trying to create these like specialized approaches for all the different types of I guess like products, assets that are out there.
I mean, OpenSea is like, I've noticed, a friend pointed out to me that like basically now they've taken away the need to put like a currency next to an object. Like it used to be like ETH, clearly. Now it's just like an optional like change to USD, right? Because I think what Reddit did was like really smart, which is they didn't use the word NFT. They just used the word digital collectible, right? And so they've taken away the narrative of like asset scam and instead moved somewhere else. But then the truth is like the fucking smart contract is the most important thing. So the royalties, it is up to collectors to advocate, and it is on them. And their reputation shows.
I think that's one thing that we're looking at as, like as a crew and like, representing artists. How can we kind of like use positive reinforcement and really celebrate collectors that do honor and support artists through and through, and aren't just trying to make a quick buck by trading it and then cutting them out of something like this, when I don't think it's unreasonable for artists to get paid for their work and their success, especially if you're making money off of it. You made the decision to buy this under the notion that the artist will continue to get support for it. So like this idea of them being confused and being angry that they have to pay royalties, well, buy things that don't have royalties then. Maybe start pitching for profile picture projects or all these different things, start advocating for no royalties on those types of projects, and vote with your wallet. I think is another way of going about it. I really don't understand the argument against it, especially with artists, with this allowing them to actually have a career.
And there's a lot that like from the academic, like honestly, most people I know in the traditional art world not associated with NFTs continue to say NFTs are scams.
I mean,
because that is the public discourse on them.
Of course.
The Ethereum Foundation, right? Like we talked about this, like only Itzel's work was shown, like only 8 artists from South America were curated, no talks on NFTs at DevCon. So the place in which you can have the conversation around something of NFTs being something other than a way to make money is small. And then the academic angle is like, as soon as you start talking about money, you're bad. So then it's like, you're in this like, okay, well, you do a really good job of like toying in between the two, I must say. Because it's hard. It's really hard.
I mean, it's difficult, but I think at the end of the day, what has always been my driving force of just like wholehearted belief into this entire art movement is, this understanding that at a macro level, the computer has not been around for even 100 years yet. You know what I mean? Everything that we're doing with this technology is so important, and we've been so ingrained in it that it's really hard to take a step back and actually look at what's happening. And I think that was one of the fun parts of like studying art history before getting into computer science, where you can actually see like, oh my God, like this is actually so cool. And there's a way in which creatives and just like the human condition is being translated through this new technology that we're experimenting with. And I think it's fascinating. And my bets are just in 100 years that these are things that people are going to want to talk about and explore. And so regardless of what happens on the blockchain or how people use it, my bet is on the arts and the culture. I think it's super important. And it's like, the internet as a whole, like my phone, I get scam calls every single day, every single day on my phone. all the time. You get text messages, like, these weird phishing scams. You get, email, like you get all these different attacks on your email. Like, that does not make the technology inherently evil or a scam. People, there will always be bad actors, which is very unfortunate that we have to deal with that. But, it is also the reality of just humans. Like, there will always be shitty people trying to scam one another, and it's up to us to be do our due diligence across the board, and welcomes any sort of reasonable regulations around all of this if we really want to see it grow into something. But I think another belief is just like, when the internet first came out, there's all this talk about the tech behind it, all these things, but when I use the computer now, I'm just using the computer. If I'm on the internet, I'm not talking about server packets. I'm not talking about anything of that sort. I'm just on a website. And I think I am pretty confident that we will just get to a point where, we're buying a digital asset, and like what's happening behind the scenes is irrelevant.
See, this is where like I disagree a little bit.
Let's talk about it. Yeah.
That's because like, okay, with like the agricultural revolution, right? From like going from foraging to like cities, like the way in which you're working and organizing dictates like the characteristics you start to have, the things you start to value, right? So like when you start living in one place with human beings, it's like, oh, this is mine, not yours. So that's like when the idea of property developed, right? And now we're transitioning to a place where a lot of people's work is on the internet. So the idea of ownership and like needing to have a place and an identity is like becoming more and more important, right? And I would argue that like blockchain, yes, but like currency that is not owned by any government actually indicates a change in the way that people are starting to think about themselves in relation to one another, like peer to peer, as opposed to like museum to like artist, or like government to artist, And
there's this. I don't know if you want to.
No.
Okay,
that's what
I'm saying of peer-to-peer, which shout out Dr. Tina Rivers Ryan on her latest exhibition, which is called Peer-to-Peer. But I think there's also this clear need for community, and this is something that has become very, very clear when over the last, I'd say like especially the last 2 years. So I've worked with artists on a very independent level, using a product base. I think one of the cool things about this entire ecosystem was just this idea of the artists being able to fend for themselves and do what they need to do, and they don't need the middleman and all these things. But it's also become clear that a lot of artists don't want that either. It's a lot. They don't want to be, CEOs of their company dealing with all the emails and the admin and, like trying to figure out what opportunities make sense and curating their own work and, just handling their own exhibitions. They don't want to do that. And so, this idea of people coming together and supporting each other in a lot of like, some of them being DAO-based, governance-based. Sometimes it's more like person to person to community. So like I work now, like, we've just started representing a handful of artists, and being able to work with them and have strategies for their career over the next few years and help them push out their work is really, really helpful. And then let's also talk about, the ways in which the collector profile has completely transformed. That is no longer just an individual or maybe even just a family office. You have groups of people, different types of shared treasuries out there, people voting on what they want to buy. And, there is this peer-to-peer, but it's still this like widespread community that lives all over the world, all engaging with each other in different ways. And again, like pretty similar to the internet. It's just, I guess in the internet, we have centralized browsers, which is different, but I guess that's a different approach.
It's true. It's no one wants to fend for themselves alone.
No,
for sure.
This ecosystem couldn't exist in a vacuum. It's, and I think even after and to talk about Art Basel once more, it was wonderful to see so many people that, I had known online that maybe I didn't know, and just be able to chat with them and again, like strengthen these relationships that we have online, in person, and continue to support one another. as a whole. So yeah, those are my thoughts.
No, that's great. That's great. Okay, so DMINTI did this project with Judy Chicago and Nadia. And so this month, like, they asked me to host instead of Colborn to like just kind of get to a little bit more of like, what do women bring value to? In my opinion, like, how do women bring value in ways that men cannot? Right? Not like hyper masculine women, but like hyper strong femininity and what that looks like. And I've asked, everyone else, and I'm especially curious for you, like when you are building an organization with a vision and you need people to respect you one-on-one and you don't get that respect because it happens very often here. What's your response, and how do you want other young women through the work that you do to start to be leaders in really strong feminine ways?
Oh, it's actually a really tough question. And I'm trying to like find some good examples in which I kind of had to stand my ground. But I think it is just that, like standing your ground and not, it's never, I've worked with men in the past that do let their egos and honestly, their emotions get a hold of them when they feel like they're being threatened in some capacity, and will respond in kind of, in my opinion, dramatic ways. And as women, we don't really get the affordance to be able to respond that way without being completely just like, oh, you're dramatic, So I try to stay as calm as possible and just stick to the facts. Keep my ground. Usually, sometimes I won't even say anything and just move accordingly afterwards. It's a lot more of a strategic approach where it's like, okay, you can just watch. I think I use a lot of those sorts of feelings to power my work even more, and to make me work even harder to just show and not tell, in a way. It's I don't have to tell you that I'm upset, but you will see in just how great this next project is that you maybe shouldn't have said what you said, or something along those lines, which is always really really great. It's a petty way, but it's a constructively petty approach of dealing with that. But honestly, I think being able to, one of the hardest things growing up as a, just like as a woman, as a girl, and kind of always being told to, like calm down or whatever it may be, was actually sticking up for myself. And the first time being like having to tell someone like, no, this is actually what I want. And this is how I want it to be done. It was terrifying the first time. I'll never forget having to stick up for myself for the first time and kind of shaking afterwards. But it gets easier. Once you do it, it comes with practice, like knowing what you want, knowing how to say it. Like I do actually have to say that, like, I had a corporate, like I did work my few years in corporate America at JP Morgan. I was super afraid of that, but I actually learned so much just seeing how a lot of the powerful women at JP Morgan ran. I was actually very, very lucky. A lot of my managers were women, and I was able to kind of look up to them in a way and see how they maneuvered like a predominantly male organization, and do it with such grace and such tact. It was so, so, so impressive. And so, that's, hopefully I answered that question.
I clenched it at it. But my follow-up is like, for, younger women, especially through the nonprofit that you run, I mean, like what do you want them to take away from generally like the conditions we have today, which is a man's world, but the ability to move up? Like, what, how does code influence that? How does like standing up for yourself and, like.
Yeah. I mean, it's confidence. I mean, it's all confidence. It's kind of like, once you learn a new skill, something kind of comes over you. I think when I first started to learn how to code, I was like, holy shit, I never thought that I could do something like this, and I can do it. Okay, great. And then it's meeting people and they're like, oh wait, you know how to do that? Like, what? And it's, I don't know, it all kind of like builds upon itself, where you have this like if I genuinely believe that I am a good person who is moving correctly in this space, and like no matter what someone says or does, like it's not gonna affect that. Fully believing in myself is like the number one, I guess, protection against anything else. Because if someone, male or female, with a decided to like, you know, feel threat or whatever and like attacked me over something about my work, go for it. I know that you're coming from a place, because you know, I know my relationships with the artists that I work with. I know my relationships with the people that I work with as a whole, and I know that I move with the best intentions, and that's something that can't really be taken away. And I don't know, I think learning new skills, feeling good about those skills, also powering through when you feel like you're not getting it. Like, you know, it took me a while to actually like feel confident enough to, you know, code things and do it with being like, oh, I actually kind of like know what I'm doing. So I think powering through those periods of uncertainty and is really one of the most important things that you can do. That's
really good advice. I mean, honestly, it's true though. Your integrity is all you have. At the end of the day, like there's absolutely if you fuck it up, it's on you.
But I think that's also a thing where it's like, you know, I'm not like, it's, you know, I'm not this person who's just like grade A student all the time that's always doing everything. Like I like, you know, I mess up just like the other person next to me. There are so many things that I've done wrong, but I think it's also just to keep moving forward, keep your head up and learn from those mistakes. And even if you have to make that mistake 3 times more, like just get better every single time, just a little bit, you know, like just keep moving. And I think that's also like no matter what, just keep moving. Like you just got to keep it going no matter what, because honestly, seeing, especially like the news cycle over the last few years, seeing all these men be so messy in the ways in which they like move around the world and still go out with their fucking head up high is like insane to me. So like noted, I'll take from there. If you guys can keep it moving, so can I.
I agree. I mean, I think there's a lot of false idols that are dying off now, which I'm really happy about. And the world needs to be like more intuitive and strong and like long-term and compassionate, which are feminine, like good characteristics, you know?
I mean, I will say in the coding arts community, some of the first 2, like when we were all on Instagram, really before like the whole Twitter NFT popped off, there was ARTXCODE and there was Creative Code Art. ARTXCODE being my Instagram account, which I was completely anonymous. I didn't want anyone to know that I was a woman. I didn't want anyone to know anything about me. That was my anonymous outlet to just share these things. And then there was Creative Code Art, which I know Ixchel's was also a very big part of. And so there are these communities. And if we look at communities now, you know, vertical crypto art and things of that sort, like you see that there are women behind the scenes kind of making this all happen, creating these spaces for people to come together and talk about this work. And one of the crazy parts is like during ARTXCODE, during those like few years of anonymity, which were probably from between like 2016, 2019, I would get messages all the time. Hey, dude, like, what's up, bro? Like, this is doing. Everyone just automatically defaulted to thinking that I was a guy, which was funny all on its own. But you know, it's also this like thing where people do this, and you can have these interests, and people never are kind of like quick to assume that it wouldn't be a feminine interest. You know, like, oh, you know how to code? Or I mean, I remember one of my first coding courses that I had taken, and we had this challenge to build something out, and I was working on a team, but I got my first prototype working. I was like, okay, it works. And one of the guys on my team was like, it can't possibly work, and like erased it and started from scratch. And I was like, okay. And like, that was like one of like the first instances where I actually like experienced like a man like second guessing my ability to do something just because I'm a girl. But I think it also just shows like we are capable of doing it. And especially when people don't know that we're behind the scenes, it's even more fun for me personally. Like I loved being anonymous for a really long time. It was really, really fun. But I think now it's also equally important to show myself, and in terms of representation, show other women that they can do this, that they can break out, and if they're passionate and actually care, like people pay attention. There are a lot of really like strong men in the ecosystem, like with very powerful messaging, very like powerful messaging. They're this and this and that, and they're doing this and they're building this, and like, at the end of the day, they're probably just looking for a quick buck. And I think artists are also really quick to suss that out. And I don't know, it's having the passion and having some of like that caregiving side, that side of like the female that really does like want to help and assist and care and meet you where you are, and have some of that emotional intelligence to know when you're working, when things aren't, and being upfront and not letting the ego drive. Which also, I mean, there are men that have this, and I can also have an ego at times, so I know that I'm not perfect, but they are feminine traits, and I do see it in like a lot of successful women in this space, and why it is kind of you do have a leg up at the end of the day, because you can do these things.
I totally agree. It's a balance though, because like with Mocha, we're a team of like 11 now, and when I'm like hiring or thinking about like people, I'm looking at like qualities way beyond gender, right? But at the same time, I'm like, we don't have any other women on our team. So I'm like, how do I find someone that is like both like the quality of human and the ability to uplift other women, and just the fact that they are in this? So like that is like a whole equation as well.
I mean, it gets really difficult at that point too, because I've had that same struggle, but I think even on the art side, and I remember there's 2 points. So like one was in the generative art space, and I advise, or I used to advise art blocks a lot more. Now I'm just back on their curation board, but before I was really helping with onboarding new artists and finding new artists, and trying to find more women in the generative art space was very difficult. This has to do with visibility, with the fact that a lot of them aren't as active on social media as the men are. And, men tend to be a lot more open to sharing their work publicly online. One of the more fascinating trends that we found on art blocks was that a lot of the women who applied and submitted their artwork did so blindly. They had no social media. We didn't even know they really existed until they applied. And we were like, where did you come from? It was like, this is amazing. Thank you so much. But like, why couldn't we find you? And that's like a huge thing. And so if you're a woman and you're listening, please start sharing your work online. Like it's please. I used to be terrified of Twitter, and I think I've had Twitter since like 2011, and I never used it because I was always scared. Maybe I would say stupid things here or there, but I remember 2021, I was like, okay, enough. Like, you just need to start speaking. Like, you need to see, like, give your opinions, say what you think, and who cares what happens. And it's one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life, which again, it was scary at first to put my thoughts out there, to be opinionated. But I think that in the end, it's worked out pretty well.
Yes.
So definitely do that. Definitely do that. Another side of this though is, which is equally, it could be kind of a controversial conversation, I don't know, but I've had conversations with curators who wanted to, do a show, and I've submitted, a male artist or something, and their responses, well, no, we want a more, diverse, we want a more diverse thing, and I have to fight back and like, well, no, like, we're not going to exclude a super talented artist because you want a more diverse, lineup. I think that both can exist. This idea of stonewalling certain artists because of their gender or their race also makes no sense in the case of diversity, when our job here is to put forward wonderful art. I think it's finding the balance between all of this is going to be, it's interesting, but I think that it's important that we don't think in like these binary approaches either of like, only like, you know, we're only going to do this show and it's only going to be women of color, or I mean, like obviously those make sense and it lives, but like I'm someone who doesn't want to be on a panel that is specifically geared towards like, oh, women in tech panel. I just want to do a panel on new media art, and I just happen to be a woman on that panel. The same way, like shows that I've done, like I've made it a point to make sure that there are plenty of women in our shows, but it's not in my press release. It's not what I'm screaming from the rooftops, because it should be normalized. It should be normal that women are artists and women can work in tech and women can do all of these things. And so I don't know, I just want it to be normalized, and I don't want it to be like gender as a spectacle or race as like, it should just be make a show, have a really like wonderful title that has nothing to do with the fact that it's all women or that it's, you know, it whatever. And those are just my thoughts. And obviously if people want to do it, they can fucking go for it. But you know, I think it's something that I feel pretty passionately about, that I don't like, it should just be normalized. And I don't want to be kind of pigeonholed into like woman. I don't want to be a female curator. Yeah, I want to be a curator. You know, I don't want to be a female artist.
100% agree.
Yeah,
I can't tell you, like, I've had someone come up to me in person and be like, "Oh my God, you're a woman of color in this space. What's it like?" And I was like, "I don't want to talk to you. You realize what you just did? You just put a circle around me and put me on the side."
Yeah, and
it's the opposite of uplifting me. Right.
And like I've found that like even the men in the space are like wonderful. I think I've only had maybe one person be condescending, and like, hey, I'll take that any day, you know, over like the hundreds, if not thousands of people I've met over the last like 3 years in this ecosystem. Like I have to say, like Art Blocks, like a lot of the community there, like I went to Marfa last year, and, you know, I was like, there were a lot of guys there, and I didn't, you know, it was wonderful. Everyone was really, really great. It's things like that make me feel really grateful for like the ethos that has been like created, especially around the arts and the generative arts. I can't speak for as a whole. We know that there's some trash people out there, but you know, I think that within the generative arts community, there's a lot of respect around everyone who truly sees what's happening here, amongst collectors, artists, curators, the whole lot. And so for that, I'm like so grateful. I mean, I think people are really, you know, horror stories get shared all the time, and I don't think it's enough that people actually talk about like how wonderful a lot of these people are, and that, you know, not all men sort of thing. I have to say, like the Gen Art community, which is the one that I'm like really like focused in, they're fucking wonderful. Like they're all so great. Like, you know, during Basel, I was out there was one day that we all ended up on the beach. I was there with, and you know, I think there was one other girl, but like at no point was I like scared for my safety or like that anyone here was like, they're friends. They're all so kind and just wonderful. So, yeah, I think we're pretty lucky about, you know, the community that's been formed around all of this, and the fact that, you know, we can all hang out and be happy and support one another. And I think that, I find that I have a lot of support in our community, and it has nothing to do with the fact like, and my gender isn't like used against me, which is really wonderful and refreshing, because if I was from the outside, and I would probably assume that it would be. And it was one of the reasons why I stayed anonymous for so long, because I thought that my gender would be used against me. So it's been a pleasant surprise that it hasn't been.
I agree. Some of the best men, most incredible minds, like I will ever meet, for sure. I will say, like in crypto separately, like in DeFi and investing, it's a shit show.
That's a different story. That's a whole different.
A trader. That's like a transactional human.
Yeah. That's a whole different story.
But yeah. Final question for you. What is on the horizon with ARTXCODE? What are you looking forward to in the next year? What do you want people to know about?
Oh yeah, so we actually have a lot of fun stuff happening. So finally expanding my team. I've come to the realization I can't do everything myself. It's been really wonderful. You know, we have a lot of really cool things in the works. I think a lot of really fun exhibitions coming for next year. We're expanding our artist roster, which I'm very, very excited about, and just happy to be able to like officially support these artists in ways that's meaningful to them. And again, always non-exclusive. We're there to support them on every opportunity that comes their way. So hit me up. But it's lots of really cool things happening, and I'm just excited. I lots of work to do, but I think it's going to be really great in the end. So lots to come. So you can definitely keep an eye out. ARTXCODE.io. Good things coming.
Breaking news.